Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this June 26th special budget meeting. And let's all stand together and recite the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone. All right, the roll has been taken. All that are on this committee are present. All right. Do we have an approval of the agenda?
So moved. Support.
Moved and supported. Any comments, questions? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposition? All right, item 5, we are on to a limited public comment. Before we do that, I'd like Mr. Dawson to address this meeting. He's got a couple of things he'd like to say before we really get rolling.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Today's special budget meeting is to go over general fund portions of the 26-27 budget, including the packet's updated budget trend analysis, general fund budget by line item. These have been updated as of 5 p.m. yesterday. We'll go through kind of detail overview by administration. So before we get too far, I want to say we do have before us what will end up being an adoptable budget. It's a conservative budget, a responsible budget, but the work session for this committee is to review an update of where we're at, and then as we review various functions, and when I say functions like general gov, public safety, and the departments that roll into those baskets, you can ask questions, make recommendations for additional changes to be made by elected and department heads. Some of our documents in this packet will show line item breakdowns, which it was requested just so commissioners could see that level of detail. However, the county has an established procedure for budgeting by function rather than activity. So while those are in there, just want to note, we budget by function, not activity. So any budget changes under the Uniform Budget Act have to be made to those functions rather than like identifying a single line item as we go through this. A couple other things, this is not special revenue or millage departments. Parks, Central Dispatch, the Child Care Fund, those will be for next special budget meeting that will occur on Friday, July 24th, 26th at 9. So I do ask, we have a lot to cover. If we could stay focused on general fund, if we're able to get through all of this today, that will really open up the next 3 meetings that we have to do budget work for Ways and Means. Yeah, and if you have recommendations, this is what it is. Broad adjustments to the budgets. Administration will work with offices to make necessary changes if you all want that to be done. All budget changes ultimately roll up to the full board for their approval, but just wanted to go through and kind of give an outline what we're looking to get accomplished today.
All right, thank you, Ben.
Yeah.
All right, now on to limited public comment. If anyone would like to speak to this board, please step to the podium, state your name. You have about 3 minutes to speak. And seeing no movement, we will proceed to item 6, 26-27 budget discussion. So item A, 26-27 multi-year general fund budget projections. And remember, everyone, these are projections. So let's move on.
They are. And talked a little bit about this. This projection sheet, we've used something like this going back to like the early 2000s. So this sheet is something staff has to put together, compile. It's not an auto-generated report out of a system. So part of this gives that historic perspective. We've went ahead and made some changes as requested. And I think long-term, we're going to keep an eye on, is there a way that maybe we can make this a little more expansive without growing it too much that it loses its historical perspective? You have all the other documents for the budget function and line item that we're going to go into, but this is meant to be a snapshot of where we're at. Projections are most accurate, obviously, for the upcoming fiscal year because we have a lot of data that's very timely. You get a little more accurate in the immediate preceding year, 27, 28 in this case. And then from the other years, they're there for informative purposes. And last year, we had to adopt a budget that had us using fund balance in the years 3 and 4 of that projection. I'm happy to report today with the changes, and there was one correction I'll go into. We're not in a position where we're even using fund balance by these projections. And these projections are conservative. So that's why I say this is a responsible, reasonable budget that you have before you today. So some of the changes that occurred, hard changes, there was an increase of 223,000 in revenue projections. There was a decrease of about 149,000 in departments cutting expenses, resulting in a total change of 372. In addition to that, we rolled out from supplies and other, that line item. We broke that into 3 rows: supplies, other services and changes, and transfers out. This actually helped for our modeling, so we were able to, some of those expenses that were rolled up in there are ones that we are not projecting doing increases on, like the medical care facility. It's always been 150,000, so growing that year over year is not accurate. So by pulling it out, it did also help to reduce some of the expense that was being tracked when it was rolled up, which is good. Let's see. So the most significant change, similar to the jail millage document that I was working on, showing the transition for moving positions off of the millage onto the general fund over the period of time. We had accidentally, when we pulled that line item out, we had double counted the expenses under salaries. So when we corrected that, that had a significant impact over the forecast. So the changes highlighted above, making sure that the personnel transfer of expenses for the jail was cleaned up so it wasn't double counted, is what put us where we're at today. With that, I welcome questions and discussions if commissioners have them.
Any questions? Commissioner Barber?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to know how we came about with the projection on property tax, because June 12th, between June 12th budget and the budget you dropped last night, there's a $211,000 increase in projected of property tax. Just wondering, like where that came from.
So I can speak to that specifically. Director Vandermark is here, and he provided additional projections based on what he knows as to changes in the property tax market. He indicated that there, rather than a 3.8% increase over the current year, he's indicating a 4.6% increase, which is what is included in your budget this month.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, Commissioner Wright.
Medical care facility, the maintenance of effort at 150,000, just asking, are they ever gonna, at the state, require us to put in additional?
I haven't heard it discussed in committee or subcommittee hearings, but technically they could. This is also one of those things where I think the state treads lightly because they don't want to inadvertently get caught into having to provide more funding themselves. So I would be surprised to see that move. And you are correct. That's our maintenance of effort established at the time that the health department became a component unit, right?
The
Medical care facility.
Medical, sorry.
Yeah, because it's been so many years, is why I'm asking.
Yeah.
It does float, it does change. We receive updated numbers annually. However, on average, it is $150,000, which is why the medical care facility has continued to keep the same request rather than make any changes.
Okay, and then another second question. With the personnel that you just brought up, Ben, do we have our insurance rates for the coming year yet to use as figures? Because some of the other situations I'm in are starting to get some shocking little news.
So that's a great question. We do not have the rates as of yet, and for 2027, we will have to have new rates for our Medicare Advantage population. We will not get new rates until probably August. However, what we did in this budget was we increased it We projected a 10% increase over current year. And then additionally, we put another 5% into our contingency. So you'll see at the very bottom where rather than 150,000 for contingency, we have 295,000.
Okay.
So that was just in case health insurance does change more drastically than what we anticipated. We put that information there.
Because I know one in particular that was looking at a 20%.
Yeah, so everybody statewide has been, nationwide really, has been looking at substantial increases. We have seen substantial increases in our health insurance for the last several years, so.
I know. Thank you.
Commissioner Haskell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the projected salaries and fringes, we've had a lot of discussion over the years on needing to do wage studies and see where we sit on our benefit scales. I do see this ticking up over time, but it kind of seems like more of like just adjusting for inflation, like standard. Does this take into account what we think we might find in those wage studies when we finally are able to do them, or no?
No, I'm glad you brought it up, and I do have a fund balance update at the end of this, but that's part of the reason for the unassigned fund balance use for this cycle. I'm requesting a portion of 1.5 million be set aside, so that if we do a salary study and it's above what we have forecasted here, that 1.5 would be there to help us implement it. And very likely, depending on what comes back for some groups, we may not be able to do it all in 1 year. And so if we have to carry it over multiple years, we'd have to structure that so that we try to preserve whatever the salary study lands at for cost of living adjustments over that same time frame. The other piece is that will require bargaining with our 7 units, which we have open contracts contracts will open next year, and we will have to negotiate all 7 of them. So you are correct. As of right now, we're using an estimated figure, but that will absolutely firm up if we do a wage study, when we go to implement it, and then the effects of bargaining. Once we have, say, a 3-year contract in place on the other side of a wage study, that category will be significantly firmer standing in terms of not being something that will change
Okay.
a couple years. Yeah.
I guess at this point in time, would you be concerned, because I do see in year 28, 29 budget, that's the lowest, or that's the closest we get to kind of hitting that deficit line before we rebound. Are you concerned that the wages and benefits, if a study were to be done, that we could be looking at a deficit in maybe 28, 29?
Yeah, so see, going to 28, 29, here's the thing, and I've had this discussion with a few folks. So projected surplus and deficit, that's the language we've always used to talk about our budgets. But at a county level, deficits are very different than federal. So
Right.
people are so used to hearing federal deficit, federal deficit, federal deficit. A federal deficit is they are literally borrowing money and printing money to pay for their spending. Counties do not have that authority. So I like to bring that in. So a deficit, by definition of this sheet, is we are simply using our savings to balance the budget that year. It's legally allowable. I wouldn't say it'd be sustainable. So if we were looking at a budget projection and we had to use fund balance in every year, that would be a red flag. But even then, so if we look at this right now, if you come down, so you have the level of whether it's a surplus or a deficit by county definition, you have your total projected fund balance. So even in that year where it's 221 over what we're expected in expenses, you're still 12.8 million of a fund balance, of which if we use that 10% minimum fund balance policy you guys adopted, that's the line where you know that you are in deep trouble if you're having to deficit spend below that 10%, and that's only 4.3 million. So the unassigned fund balance in that year, we estimate at like 8.5 million, right? And that'd be me coming and saying, I think we should do this much to MERS, this much here. Now notice, because we haven't adopted that fund balance policy, there was 3.6 million of unassigned. When we adopt that policy, it will come out of that difference from, right? So in the current year, the difference from minimum fund balance is 7.9. If we put 1.5 aside for implementing a salary study and doing a salary study, do like 1.7 to MERS, that will come off right there and reduce it going forward. But the other thing, we budget conservatively. And what does that mean? If we have a position that's vacant, we don't assume we're gonna get somebody step 1 with no health insurance. We budget them as if they're step 7, top of whatever scale, and that they have full family coverage. And as you know, when you hire people, that's not often the case. You know, you might get somebody with 2 or 3 years' experience, and maybe they start in the scale, but they're not typically always at the top. And you have people, especially younger ones, who come in that are on their parents' health insurance till they're 26, 27. And in that case, that's like a $30,000 savings. So when we budget, we assume every project gets shovel in the ground, everything gets spent, and every position is budgeted. And that's why you have budgetary savings that makes up your unassigned fund balance each year. So a couple of the things we've done, we adopted that minimum fund balance. That's your first gatekeeper to make sure that the county spends responsibly. The other thing that you said is we're not using the fund balance to balance our budget in the year. Whatever's unassigned after the audit takes effect, we actually look at that and we use it to fund our long-term priorities. In this case, that 1.5 for helping with the salaries, that's part of the strategy. We've needed a wage study for the better part of 12 years.
Yeah.
Might not be able to do it all in 1 year, but if we can use the unassigned fund balance to break it up over a period of years, we can. And it's a way to help achieve our goals. I don't have it this year, but we need to do a countywide fee study. Administratively, we do. So like next year, that would probably be one of the things that I would ask if there's an unassigned fund balance above that 15%, because it's 10 of expenses, 5% for you all to have as budgetary consideration, and anything over that, I would make a recommendation. And it's been a long time since we've done that too. And it's been brought up, Commissioner Barber's brought it up, like, and we really do. We're right now fixing them as we find them, like the enhanced fee schedule appeal that we brought to the full board earlier this month, but we really ought to do them all at once with the contractor. Yep.
Okay, any other questions? All right. Moving forward. What else do you want to address, Ben?
I will do a handoff to Melissa. Let me just get back into my system real quick. Apologies. Timed out on me. All right, so budgets are living documents. This part is natural of the budget process as revenue and expenses become more finely tuned. The closer we get to final adoption, which is Wednesday, September 16th at 6 p.m. We budget conservatively, not in the political sense, but from an accounting standpoint. We have budgeted and we assume all the projects, all of that takes place. So as we go into it, we will continue to have a much better position. We weren't able to get our MERS evaluation. Once we get that, I'll implement the effect that will have on salaries for the next year. And I would wager, good point that I didn't bring up. So we currently, not using the unassigned fund balance, are budgeting $1 million to MERS each year, right? But when we forecast the retirement expenses, right now, we're estimating at 5%, which is the historic increase to MERS before we took an aggressive pattern of attacking the unfunded liability. So to say every time there's an improvement because the money that we're putting aside is reducing our operating expenses, it will have an effect and it will reduce future anticipated expenses with it as well. And I should have that by next Ways and Means, so. They will have the report to me by June 30. I should have an analysis ready for you all at the Ways and Means.
All right, thank you. Any
Yep.
other questions? Commissioner Haskell.
Are you confident of that?
I am, because I've been all over their call sheet, and if
Yeah.
nothing less, they'll probably want to give Eaton County theirs just so I leave them alone.
Sure, good.
Yep.
Thank you for
Tell
that.
by the knocking on the desk, he was very confident.
Yeah, yeah.
Very confident.
I see that as such a key piece of information for us, so.
It is, and I remind, like, I know you probably get this from everybody. Their evaluations are important to all of them, but
Yeah.
we had to cut $8 million from our budget. We have commissioners still concerned about, do we need to cut more? And knowing what our expenses are gonna be, not next year, but the year after, that's a huge piece of information. So do us a solid, get us our report. And this is a kind of late for them. We usually get it in early June. So it could be because all the changes we made, adding the 5-year amortization, doing the upfront funding, maybe ours is more complicated, and that's why they're taking till June 30th. So
Understood, thank you.
All right, so, back to Melissa.
All right,
You have the
so.
floor for the next 4 hours.
Lord, no, I hope not. My voice will get tired from that, and I'm sure everybody will get tired of listening to me at that point. So I just want to go through, Ben talked through several of the changes that we have from June 12th. We did receive updated tax revenue, as well as there was some minor adjustments to some expenses. The courts and several other departments came forward and said, we've reviewed our budgets. Based on current year projections, we believe we can make additional reductions. So they were able to bring some things forward. So thank you very much to the trial court administrator and the deputy administrator. They've both been in close communication with us for those things. So that did also change some of our revenues, actually, because of expense decreases sometimes trigger revenue decreases. So that's why there's a couple of changes. I just wanted to make sure to highlight those. So as you can see, every meeting we bring forward additional changes for your review. I just want to say from the very beginning of this budget, we've had changes of approximately $1.4 million, both in revenue and expenses. So budgets are a living document. They do take time to build and develop. So it's one of the reasons why we don't stop at the adoption of the budget. We also have to follow up with budget amendments. So we continuously monitor it and make sure that everything is smooth sailing, trying to get things processed, but it does take time. So thank you very much for your understanding on that. I don't have any additional things that have changed substantially regarding the annual budget by function, but one of the things I wanted to go through is specifically each of the expense categories here. So we have our expense categories for legislative, judicial, general government, public safety, and then the remainder. So I want to take some time this morning to go through that, and as you guys have questions, just let me know. Most of it is kind of high-level overview, but kind of want to just have an opportunity to talk through some of those things.
And if I can just add, so we will go through the functions, so legislative, judicial, gen gov, public safety, health and welfare. So when we get to legislative, Melissa will give a brief summary of the department, and then if there are questions for that budget, she's going to have a sheet that she can pull up and expand. This is interactive with the sheet that you all have in the packet. So you can actually ask and she can expand and contract right down to what you want to talk about. And then once we complete a department, we'll move to the next, and then we'll move through each function. So that way, if anybody has a question on the department, we don't miss it. So that's the sequence we'll look to follow.
Any questions? Moving forward. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Morrow.
Mr. Chair, and the administration, I would just like to, I guess I'm asking for an alibi because I wrote all my questions by page number. So when you're flipping, we're going to have to flip because I might ask a question that's not in that category anymore, and I can either wait but just to let you know, because I use the documents that were provided to formulate questions, so.
So page 133 of the packet right now, this is the expense just overview by organization. So I wanted to start with commissioners. This is our legislative. The change from this year, while it seems like a substantial dollar amount of 23%, it only accounts for $23,000. We do have 15 FTEs that are funded by this org set. So that is all of you. So, yes, sir.
All right, well, in the PDF packet, it's page 15, right? So it's, the last 6 digits is 713.000, right? It's commissioners,
7.
right?
You said it was which page in the packet?
In the line-by-line packet that you sent out, sent out this morning, it's page 15. It's first expenditures, commissioners, line by line.
No, the line by line is a different page.
Yeah. It'll be, that's revenue
These are revenues, yep.
when you get down to expenses.
There we go.
Okay. Yeah, so, first question, line 713, retirement. So we had in 25, 26, there was 11,000 budgeted, and now in 26, 27, there's 9,000 budgeted. So there's commissioners that receive retirement?
That is correct.
How many?
There are 2
2 commissioners
currently, yes, that
That-
are enrolled in the program.
that receive retirement? Okay.
They also contribute to the retirement, but yes.
Yeah, okay. Interesting. So that means they've been on the board long enough to vest?
No, that means that they've elected to
Okay.
be included in the retirement program.
Okay. All right, that's all I have for that page. Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions?
So then the next section of our categories or functions is specifically related to our trial courts, the judicial section. Now, this is general fund only. This is specifically for the courts. It's the circuit court, the district court, front of the court, probate court, juvenile court, and then our community corrections program. Again, this is the general fund portion only, does not include all of the special revenue funds that also contribute revenue towards the county. So there's changes within personnel, within their supplies and other, and then other services and charges. And I did provide in the packet a breakdown of what accounts fill into supplies as well as other services and charges. I know that that accounts for a very large section of our budget, and it sounds very vague. It's not intentionally vague. It is actually a category within the State of Michigan Chart of Accounts that is a standardized language for that, and it unfortunately does mean other, so. Are there any questions related to the trial courts? They do account for 53 FTEs within the general fund.
Commissioner Barber?
I'm sorry, I misunderstood, because I had more, it was my fault, right? I let you go on to judicial. I still had further questions in the,
Regarding commissioners?
well, I mean, if you look on here, it's technically, so it'd be page 16 instead, and I guess it does fall under commissioners. So it'd be 900.000. It's the advertising line, so I don't know, maybe somebody could just answer from the top of their head. 25, 26, we had $4,000 budgeted for advertising, and in 26, 27, we have $2,500. What's the advertising?
So advertising is for any of the public hearings that we have here at the
Okay.
courthouse.
Okay. And then, hold on, let me make sure it's still in the commissioners. but it falls under the controller's office. So we passed the controller's office?
No, we have not. That is in our general government section of the budget.
Then I'll be quiet for a minute.
Okay, any other questions? All right, back to Melissa.
So we've gone through judicial. Were there any questions about the judicial section of the budget?
I do have one that spans multiple, so can I ask that?
That's up to the board's
It's going to,
discretion.
yes, Chair, it's going to be one of those days. So, on page 22, 38, there's a total of 6 for shredding, right? I was wondering, I mean, they vary in amounts, right? Is there some reason that, like we got a high of $3,000 and then we got a low as $800?
It depends on the size of the shred box as to where it's located and how it's used, and then also how frequently it gets emptied.
Well, they are on the line by line, they're all allocated for 12 units, so.
Yes, one for each month.
Okay. All right.
Melissa, is that an outside vendor that takes care of that for us?
That is an outside vendor. They are CGIS compliant, and they are, all we have to do is place paper in there. We do not have to do anything. It's completely secured as well. So that's why it is a little bit more expensive, and we do identify it by line item, so we don't forget to do that one, so.
And just for, well, discussion, we probably, how many vendors do we have for that, for the whole county? Because we need it for the sheriff's department, our office.
We use the same vendor for these, for all of them. So they, our office uses it, we simply didn't itemize it by the line item.
So it's individual contracts?
It's not individual contracts, it's a single contract with the one vendor that is going across multiple departments.
And part of, we consolidated down so that every department used one vendor, one operation that we knew. So every department didn't have their own management style, so we consolidated down some years ago to really.
Actually, what we did was we actually got rid of a lot of the shredding bins, so we no longer had to maintain the actual physical shredding equipment ourselves. So we actually, there's very few shredders in the county, and we don't have to replace a $5,000 shredder. We simply pay a vendor to take care of that. So.
I'm sure that answers some kind of FOIA questions too, but. Some kind of liability. Anyway, all right, Melissa, carry on.
All right. Are there any other questions when it comes to our judicial departments? I will say our trial court administrator and deputy trial court administrator are both here in the audience. If you have specific questions of them, up to the board's chair as to whether they're welcomed forward to ask.
Yeah, page 44. I fully don't have this question because I didn't know there was, like, we was going to be able to ask them questions today, but $3,000 on QuickBooks. It's the only QuickBooks in the whole budget.
That is correct, because QuickBooks is specifically for our district court office. They have a separate cash account, 2 of them, and it's statutorily required that they have separate accounting. So that is why they have their own software. Everything else runs through our financial system. So they process their QuickBooks transactions daily, and then once a month that they process a deposit, they run all of their own checks. So everything else runs through the county general ledger.
Any other questions?
And then they have vehicles?
They do.
Court does?
The trial courts have vehicles. There's one vehicle that used to be assigned to the front of the court office, but when we did budget cuts back in 2016, the front of the court use was no longer necessary. So they actually use it for anything that's necessary within the trial court. So if they have training, if they're doing a bank deposit, there's no current thoughts to replace the vehicle. It is a 2016 vehicle, and that would be up to the courts to choose to replace at that time. I know that that's not very high priority, but they do also have other vehicles for our juvenile court office, as well as for programming within the youth facility.
I don't have any other questions for the courts.
All right, any other questions? All right.
Then if we are done with the judicial section, I will move on to our general government section, which is probably the most intensive. That covers many of our elected offices that are not specific to public safety. So that the category covers the controller's office, the county clerk, technology services, the treasurer's office, as well as equalization, facilities, the prosecuting attorney, and then drain office as well. This section of the budget, the function of budget, does have 90 FTEs that are general funded through the budget process. Are there any questions on any one specific department? Would you like me to go over any specific department?
Mr. Chair?
Oh, Commissioner Haskell then.
Thank you for that. So a lot of the offices, as I scroll down through, I see line items for printing. I'm assuming it'd be under some sort of general fund budget somewhere in here for, I'm thinking materials like this are educational materials for millages that we may or may not have on the ballot. What fund would that fall under?
So there's a distinction. Any printing that, like you were holding right in your hands, anything that's printed internally, we have paper for that, and we have a service contract for our physical printers. So there's not any additional expenses for that that's charged to a specific line item. That's in repairs and maintenance for office equipment. That's where those expenses ended up going for, like, printer cartridges, that sort of thing. If you have professional materials printed, your business cards, any of the handouts from dispatch, those are what go into the 901 printing account. So that's why that's not necessarily a very large account as you look across the general fund budget.
Okay, I guess maybe the 901 is the one I want to look at then, because I feel like I have been doing, some work and handing out, trying to educate the public on millages, and I feel kind of like we're a little bit handicapped with our ability to communicate and educate on things that it may not be day-to-day business. So I'm curious, like, are we keeping the same kind of prediction of costs going forward, or are we recognizing that we need to spend more money in communicating out to the public?
Well, some communication costs don't cost any money.
Sure.
They cost time. They cost staff time. So like the printouts that you were holding, Logan probably spent several hours, several days ensuring that everything was appropriate and accurate, making sure it looked nice. So he's developing that, which is why it's a half-sheet handout. But there's not any printing explicit costs. Now, the dispatch section specifically is funded through the millage, and that is something that we'll discuss next month.
Okay. But I think, Logan, I think you would admit that if we had the funds to do something more than this, we would want to do it, right?
I mean, yeah, there's different schools of thought, and I've been here almost 3 years, and there's been, I guess, different schools of thought kind of competing against each other on where we spend advertising money, or if we spend advertising money, even whether it's education during a millage or not. And the prevailing opinion has typically been no. We haven't done that historically. But yeah, if we want to spend or consider allocating more funds towards educating communications like that, for sure, we could, and I think it could be beneficial. But again, there's different schools of thought, so I'm kind of dancing around what you're asking.
Understood. Yeah, you're being diplomatic, and I appreciate it. So,
I'll speak to it a little too. We did do one mailer in the 2023 campaign, and it was mixed results, and just generally, there are larger organizations, and especially this time of year in an election year, everybody's getting bombarded with mailers from PACs and candidates and et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of saturation in the market.
Yeah, and I would say, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Ben.
Yeah.
Some of that stuff, whether if it's a mailing or whatever it is, like that's a very specific thing, and Eaton County specifically, we don't have very good data either on that. We'd have to procure that, pay for that too, for a mailing to be beneficial or worthwhile. And then, but in terms of like printing flyers and that kind of thing, that can be inexpensive. You know, we have some commissioners going to events and such, like yourself. We don't have any general county signage or anything like that. We're working on actually getting that, and we had talked about this a couple years ago, about spending money on that, and it was kind of shot down. And so it's kind of conflicting schools of thought, and I think it also depends on where you're at, whether that messaging is effective or not. But yeah, so it's a data piece, it's a staff time piece, and it's a how much money we want to spend.
And then, we get the question as we're going to the township meetings too, like, what are you doing to get the word out? We've been working for years to try to build up saturation with our newsletter, so we put that out every month, but it takes years to build a good base of people subscribing to a service like that. And we only built that infrastructure like 3 years ago when we brought Logan aboard. Never had a newsletter before that. County just didn't communicate with the public. Same with our social media pages. So there's been discussion at some of the meetings where folks are like, can you do videos? Can you do this? So it comes back to what resources are available, and then what do we prioritize as the best return on investment? So to Logan's point, it's just a matter, we could do a lot, but sometimes it just depends on how much money we have to do it.
well, and I think that's my point exactly, right? Is like, we've had a lot of conversations about communicating and being out in the public and doing different things, and I think it'd be a little disingenuous to kind of like just talk about it and as a theory, and then not do anything about it on the budget. So maybe that's, I don't know exactly what the answer is, but maybe that's just a challenge to the staff here to be like, hey, what would be an improvement? What gives you more leverage on communicating and educating?
Yeah, and I would say too, I mean, my role shifted a little bit, and we realigned it to what the work I was doing, that became necessary for me to do. And so what I've talked about over the last several months, and that change was official, I think it was November or December last year, is I need to strike a balance within the controller's office, but we just haven't had the ability to do that yet, but that is in the cards. And so I think if we strike that balance of like, I have an office of one, and so I don't have folks for that. So figuring out how do we balance my role and what I'm focused on day to day, which looks different every day. And so that's part of the conversation with the controller's office that we're trying to strike a balance and figure out. It's been a little tricky as of late, but so I think as we work to do that over the next few months, I think that'll be something I would bring to Ways and Means and then the board to figure out like, hey, what direction do we want in terms of, because I'm still doing the communications, but my role is a lot bigger than that now. So it's figuring out where that balance is.
And there is a $10,000 for advertising education campaign for next fiscal year that's in there. That won't pay for everything. So it will give us the opportunity to say, do we want materials if we set up a booth? Like for instance, if we're doing a career fair at MSU, do we want to show up with a blank table and like nothing to hand out and like, come work for us, right? I mean, not that we have money like the private sector, but those folks come in decked out with swag, with their logos on everything. And so realistically though, we could have that because that would work not just there, it'd work at the fair. You could reuse the materials for multi-purposes. And then if we want to do like ads on Facebook and stuff, those are sometimes more economical than mailers, right? So that education campaign would be what we would use for whatever the needs are at the time. We'll know more about what future looks like for us, come
How much
September.
was that budget last year?
That's a new item that we.
So that's what I'm looking for there. So we do have all right,
I was going to say, I did
like,
actually.
we got there.
Sorry.
Knowing that that was actually something that the commissioners were wanting to prioritize, I did go through and create a new line item in our budget that supplies community engagement.
Perfect.
So that's directly related to all of the things that the prosecutor may choose to do, trying to recruit employees, same thing with the sheriff, and anything that our HR director is trying to do, so that we can build some basis of that and ensure that we are communicating with the public. So there is actually a line item specific for that.
Okay, so,
We got to recognize those that have already raised their hand. Commissioner Shaver.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Some of these questions are gonna sound nitpicky. I just feel responsible for everything that's in here, so I need to know what some things are or why we're doing things. On page 47 of the packet, we're paying $200 for the county journal. I've received the county journal for the last 20 years and not paid anything for that. I see some other subscriptions in there that I understand we want news magazines and stuff like that, but you got New York Times, 5 subscriptions to State Affairs, a subscription to Grammarly. I guess people use that. I know how to spell. What's the causation for those?
Well, I can speak for sure to quite a bit of that. We do have to remain engaged with current affairs, both at the federal and at the state level, and sometimes that means we have to pull from a number of resources. So we have the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal, both of which I've been monitoring the housing bill that just passed the Senate and the House and went to the president's desk for signature and is still getting evaluated. That may have implication for housing policy that rolls down through HUD and through, right. So that's one example. I need to keep up on inflation data, jobs data at the national level, and the impact that that's going to have potentially on our budgets. You've got local media as well. If we're trying to keep tabs on what's going on at the legislature, we have to be able to not hit paywalls. So that's what these subscriptions do, is ensure that we're able to keep apprised. Like when we had the risk of potential state projects getting cut through that little tiff that happened between the House and the Senate, there was not a lot of good information available coming out of Lansing on that because everybody was legally prepped for a fight. So we had to rely on whatever sources of info we could get. And that's for those. SHRM is a human resource organization. They do trainings and have materials available. So for our HR payroll staff, that's like a mitigation risk type of a thing. If we're able to make sure that we've got the resources for them to do their job well and save us from potential lawsuits. That's what those are for. The state affairs are going to be something for development for our public affairs for Logan, that he can go and have access to materials similarly for public communication and public affairs. The county journal, that's the only piece I don't know. Is that for us to do advertisings in there, or is that, okay.
It's electronic access
Okay.
for us to log in. A lot of these places are charging subscription fees to even access the news. Specifically, LSJ is really bad at it.
Oh, I know.
So it is critical to be able to access that communication and see the news articles, not just the previews of those news articles. And I know this is into the weeds on the software licensing. Grammarly may seem like overkill on that, but I will tell you that we use that every day. It's not just a spell check, it's also grammar check and making sure that everything that comes out of our office looks professional. We really don't want to send something out that would embarrass you.
Well, that's good. NeoGov, job application software, 13,000.
Yes,
It's
sir.
on the next page.
Indeed.
That's Indeed?
No, that is
I
our,
apologize.
Okay.
that's our
It's-
HR
it's-
recruitment
That is
software.
literally what we use for posting online, and that,
Okay.
yep. It also, because a lot of municipal units use it, it does have a compare feature where you can compare certain jobs across communities. So if a group has NeoGov, I can go and pull some job application and job descriptions through this as a resource. We actually reduced this significantly. We used to have 3 other modules. We scaled down to just the website. Because to be honest, we didn't have staff to fully utilize the other modules, which were cool, but you needed a full-time FTE just to manage the modules. So this is as scaled down as we could get this software.
That's good news. You already addressed my question on the education campaign, I think, so on page 49. So that's my questions for that. I think Commissioner Barber had some questions.
I do have a few questions. Just to go back what Commissioner Haskell was asking, just for me to clarify, right? So the first question I asked, page 16, that fell into the commissioners, and you said that advertising line item was to post and advertise public, special meetings or meetings in general, right? And then you're saying on page 20, the next advertisement, that falls into the controller's office. You're saying that is for Logan to buy or produce millage or other item. I mean, that's $10,000, but, right? Make sure I didn't misquote. Yeah, 10,000. So that was your answer to Commissioner Haskell. That's for future to millage stuff or other things that we need?
100, yep. If essentially as much educational, either if it's physical materials or yep.
Okay, I thought that's what you said, but I was just clarifying for myself. So, okay, so then if we could go back to page 17, I'll leave my supplies and other question for a few minutes, but I was wondering, since I'm talking about Commissioner Haskell, I'm just going to piggyback on him, and once again, sorry about hitting my mic with my arm. I know he's very adamant about the purchasing policy, right? And so, looking at the equipment under $5,000, right? When you look across the budget, this last year, right? I'm asking because equipment under $5,000, right? You don't have to come to the board for approval, which is totally fine. It's predominantly the controller's office and the facilities department that use it. $51,000 for purchases under $5,000, where basically the only other department that used it was facilities, and they were at $30,000, which I know facilities, right? A gasket blows out and it's $3,000, we don't need to be waiting for approval. We just need to get it fixed, right? So my question is like $51,000 that the controller office used for purchases under $5,000.
So that is for our current year amended budget, and that is for the changes within our office, including new desks, new furniture, because that is absolutely necessary when you add staff. Yes, it does seem like a lot. The reason why it's in this category is because I want a line item that we know will fluctuate and departments have to itemize. Is it below the capitalization threshold? Absolutely. Is it something that we need to track and identify year over year? Probably not with the level of granular detail that we do with our normal capital expenses that are over the threshold. That's why it's not just in supplies other and buried there, because we want to make sure that we don't skew our projections for the future by having those numbers in there.
Yeah, which I appreciate, and I'm sure if any of the public look in here and look at supply other, they're, very appreciated that you didn't put it in there also, right? So,
And it's we are taking conference room A over, we're adding like a wall with the glass, so we will have a customer service window, which the controller's office has never had before, so it'll mirror how the treasurer's office and deeds is set up. And I'm hopeful, because Chad is really good about coming in under budget, he's been doing most of that work in-house, which is a good way to reduce project costs, and I know his facility staff appreciate as often as possible, not farming stuff like that out. So I believe that's just what was approved, and
Yes.
when it's done, we'll have a better idea, but there will likely be budgetary savings in that category as well.
And then, supplies other, right? I'm sure we got a good explanation. But, we're budgeting 40,000 for the controller's office. The only reason it sticks out is like, when you go across the whole line budget, right? And I'm not picking on any department, but you got the controller at 40,000. There's two at the sheriff's. I'm sure, I think one of them is, the corrections. Once again, I didn't write it down, but, they're asking for 35,000, 30,000. And then when you look across the other, there's 22 incidences of supplies other across the budget, right? And so you get three that are 30,000 or higher, and then you get one at 4,000, one at 3,000, and then the rest are zero. So I'm just wondering, is there a standard in which things go into the supplies or other?
So
Or
there
is
are
it,
standards
I don't
on
know
there.
where it goes, so we throw it into supplies and other?
No, this is specifically related to things that aren't quite office equipment or office supplies. These are things.
They can't be office supplies because
Right.
we got a
because we
line
have
item.
A line item for office supplies. So that's stuff that is a supply, as in it's a consumable product that has a shelf life of less than a year, and is not categorized as something you would use as an office supply. The reason why the controller's office has its own and is such a substantial amount compared to all the rest is because we purchase all of the paper that is used countywide. So we purchase pallets of paper at the beginning of the fiscal year and then distribute it out throughout the complex as needed. What we don't do is reallocate that back to the departments. That's not fiscally responsible use of my time, when in reality, these are all general funded departments that are all still utilizing the same paper. That accounts for about $20,000 of that $40,000.
Okay. All right. I have no further questions.
Commissioner Mott.
Yeah, I just want to thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to go back to, we were talking about the flyers and stuff like that. I just want to be clear, and for the public that's listening, there were terms floated around, campaigns, elections. I just want to be clear that this stuff is informational stuff that we are sending out. It is not a yes campaign. So just to be clear, this is not taxpayer dollars for, campaign material to vote yes or no. So.
Thank you. Thank you for your patience, Commissioner Wright. Now you're up.
Okay, this just kind of goes back a ways to when Controller Dawson mentioned ads on Facebook. That's what I was concerned about. As the commissioner down here said, he's taken the County Journal for 20 years. However, in Delta and in Grand Ledge, which is several of our voters, we don't do anything but Facebook. And we have no local papers. So my concern is being able to do those ads that we're seeing now, to just inform people, as to what we do and things like that. But I know that years ago, I attended a meeting in Lansing, and our area is high users of Facebook. They had some data. So I'm just saying, I don't even know how to communicate with our voters. I mean, unless they show up at an event like we had for Juneteenth or, the Delta information meeting that they held at the junior high there at Waverly, things like that. But I got people have no clue that they're going to have an AV ballot here Saturday or by Tuesday.
Yeah, and I appreciate it. And you do have the Delta Unfiltered guy. I don't know what category he falls into, but he is popping around out there. In fact, he may summarize this meeting. No, I would say I agree with what you're saying, and I know we have this discussion with the smaller locals too. It is tough to engage the public.
Yeah.
People are exhausted when they get home from work. and they're done taking care of their kids. They don't go out to meetings. And we're all inundated with information all the time. So I agree with you. It is a tough needle to thread, but this at least means we have a baseline to work with going into each year, and the priorities may shift depending on what we have going on. Ultimately, if we can build people subscribing to our newsletter, following us on social, those are free ad. So anything we can do to build up those bases is a better return on investment in the long run. But this 10,000 at least gives us something to work with to maybe help build interest around following the county's free media.
Any other questions? All right, moving on, Melissa.
So that covers our office within the general government section. So we can go through the next one. We have the county clerk's office. 10 FTEs funded through that office. Then we have the technology services department, and they have 13 FTEs. We have the treasurer's office, and there are 5 FTEs. Technically, they have 6 FTEs, but one of them is funded through another funding source. So only 5 impact the general fund. Then we have our equalization office with 5 FTEs as well. Facilities, there are 13 that are funded through the general fund. Prosecuting attorney's office, there's 25 FTEs. This does include several grant funds and organizations through that funding. Then we have the drain commissioner, and the drain commissioner has 4 FTEs. And last but not least, we do have a separate section for Register of Deeds. Technically, that is within Clerk Morris's department and purview. So exploring consolidating that into making it easier for reporting. That may end up showing up next month. However, it wasn't high priority as much as being able to explain all of the individual line items within budgets. So.
Any questions? Yes, sir. Commissioner Haskell.
We did a lot of reshuffling between various offices and restructuring. Do we know of any offices that are still planning to offer some sort of restructuring plan and how that could affect the budget once, if we were to pass this and then move forward?
Long-term, so you've got the drain office that's already gone to the consultant, and technology services gone to the consultant. We're in discussions with the prosecutor about change in his office to more closely align to changes we made in the public defender's office. Those would be more narrowly focused, probably adding an administrator, and so we can bring kind of that footprint, just so that we don't create an imbalance in the justice system by giving capacity to one side and not to the other. So that will probably be a budget amendment in September or after October 1st, and the prosecutor is here too if that comes up. But so that, and I think that's it. Oh, and sorry, construction code is working right now with the going away of planning and zoning, and losing Brandy, who previously kind of served almost as a deputy capacity, / she probably was, but we never structured it that way. Would be looking at not adding FTEs, but adding an office manager and then having a lead building inspector who can be the backup in case there's turnover at the director level. Those would be the only 2, other than the ones you've already seen.
Okay, and I guess my thought again was going back to a similar discussion we had with the wage studies before and how that can affect, but I'd imagine the conversation goes down the same path we've already had, so I'll withdraw that question. Thank you.
Yeah, and when we do get to that point, those changes in the prosecutor's office would be partially grant funded, and then the changes in construction code would be through their restricted revenue. But we would make sure to tease out what that looks like for the general fund consideration at the time. Yeah.
Any other questions? All right, seeing none. Melissa?
All right, so if there are any other questions related specifically to the general government org set. If there aren't any other questions, then
Commissioner Shaver.
It is not.
No,
I
it is
just
not.
Wanted you to have it tucked away since the question came up. Oh, that will be the next special budget meeting. So we'll do all special restricted revenue. Yep. No problem, no problem. It was weird because planning and zoning was technically general fund, so I can understand your confusion. Yep.
I'll try not to advertise that, Andy.
Commissioner Arndt looked like he had a question.
Commissioner Haskell, you had a question?
Do you have a question?
All right, moving forward.
All right, so that concludes general government, and now we'll move into public safety. So public safety, there's 21 FTEs that are funded through county patrol, which is a misnomer. On here, it's Sheriff Administration / Command Central. It's simply something that I haven't updated within our financial system, not something that is something from the sheriff's department, not how they want it presented. So I apologize. I thought I had fixed it everywhere, but I missed a couple spots. We do have Windsor, which you see Windsor has been zeroed out for the upcoming budget year. That is because of the contract implementation. And then Waverly Schools, as we don't know what the contract is finalized to be, we have it in here as a placeholder. So once that is figured out, this will likely move from this org set. Then we have our Animal Control Department, funding 1 FTE through that. And corrections, there are 38 funded through the general fund.
Commissioner Haskell.
Sorry, just real quick, going back to the Waverly Schools, you said that that would move to a different line?
Yes, once we've finalized contract negotiations with that, right now, we've extended the contract through 9/30 of 2026. We don't know where it's going to be, but obviously, we don't want to just eliminate an FTE if that's something that the board is saying we want to continue the program. We don't want to scare any of our employees.
Sure. No, I thank you. So that would just move that 14,000 to a different bucket. So numerically speaking, all the money is the same.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Wright.
And even if if it gets, potentially if Delta were to take up bringing it under that contract, it would become part of 218, which is the org set for the Delta contract. And now that we're contracting where it's 100% pay, when we establish those, they come out of the general fund completely. So hypothetically, if a school could do a contract for a full-time, they'd get their own line item. So the way it used to be was because it was general fund integrated, it rested with the general fund. But as we secure a police contract, we roll them out so that they're our own standalone org set.
Commissioner, who's next? Commissioner Shaver.
Couple questions, just so I can understand, Melissa. We're changing you referenced that you didn't change the name here. You're changing that to administration?
Administration / Command Central, that is based on discussions with the sheriff.
Okay, and so the taxpayers are paying 4.1, am I reading this correctly, million?
Right now, 4.1 for personnel. Total expenses in that section of the budget is 5.6 million.
So it's 5.6,
In total expenses, that includes supplies, other services and charges, their capital and their debt service.
okay.
And this might be a good segue. We did include an updated organizational structure for the sheriff's department. So I can actually go through that and kind of highlight how we structured with all the cuts that took place.
Okay, I can pause my questions.
Yeah, and then this was related to questions that came up, so I think it's good. So we had a version of this that was part of the adopted structure for the Sheriff's Department last year. So it starts out, you've got Command Central as its own division, and then you have Delta Township Road Patrol as its own division. So for the Command Central, it kind of gives you a breakdown of the org chart and how it's structured. Within that, we have a breakdown, and the sheriff is actually here as well, so if you guys have questions, him and his command staff can assist as well. So of the 22 FTEs, 2 are command in the sense of the sheriff and undersheriff themselves, sheriff being an elected constitutional officer, undersheriff elected second in command. Then you have a chief deputy, who's the highest ranking deputy in the office, oversees operations and budget. You have the administrative services captain, which is 30% funded by Delta's admin fee. They're responsible for personnel matters within road patrol and corrections. So they do all the hiring, the background checks, the medical checks to make sure we're putting the right people in the right jobs. We have a lieutenant that does lean tack. We used to have this as that particular operation. We had a full-time dedicated support staff that did that. They were part of the budget reduction, so this lieutenant, in addition to the other duties that they're over, also is the primary officer to maintain compliance as the agency coordinator for that. Then we've got the lieutenant for special response teams, SRT. This is essentially the equivalent of SWAT for the sheriff's department, and we still have mutual aid agreements, so this is who will coordinate efforts if there's like a event in Eaton Rapids or in Delta Township or in somewhere else in the county that doesn't have, needs a faster response time. We still have the mutual aid in place to try to mitigate risks like that. Also, the active violence incident team. So that's what this role does. We have a sergeant over transport and court services. So they oversee day-to-day operations for inmate transports and courthouse security. The sergeant under contract services is currently 21% funded from service revenue. If we're able to secure any additional contracts outside of the Windsor and outside of the Delta, each contract they have to pay 21% towards this person's salary. So it should become an FTE that begins to wean off of the general fund as we're able to add. We have to have a detective over the county to help with prison rape elimination cases and complaints within the corrections division, and plus they work on cold cases. 2 transport deputies. Prior to the budget changes, these transports for inmates were happening on jail overtime. So there's still overtime in the jail, but this actually took a segment of that out. So those transports are now being done by deputies on straight time. So it's been part of a transfer. Also, they do warrants, so they're going to other communities. If somebody has an Eaton County warrant and they call and say, do you want to come pick them up? We either have the option sheriff has the option to release them and say, we don't have personnel, and they let the person go, or they can send somebody to bring them in to reside for court. And then the courthouse security, we used to do 1 FTE here, but there has always been a request for additional resources on that. The sheriff and the chief judge, they work together to provide courthouse security. This model, it used to be we would rely on pulling deputies from the road to come in and help if there was an incident. This right here makes the courthouse a contained unit in and of itself, even if there is no road patrol, right? This was the footprint that was adopted. Of the 22, 4 of them are administrative staff, executive assistant, admin services assistant. The admin services is 30% funded through Delta. You have your quartermaster and deputy training officer, which I skipped over somehow, but we have to have the property officer, we have to maintain chain of custody of service of evidence, and then the education piece, they do continuing education development for both corrections and deputies entering the force that need to get MCOL certified. There's the academy portion of their training, and then the portion we run is field training. Both of those are 30% funded by the admin fee. So that is Command Central. Built into that as of right now but is the Waverly and the Windsor Township. Even though Windsor's 100% funded, it was still for count purposes part of that count. And then the contract, so we're trying to break it up so you can see contractual services versus just Command Central. And then animal control, those directions and orders still run through the sheriff's department. So while we have one FTE and they do a great job, they have the backup of Captain Coleman and Seidel and the sheriff providing additional guidance and direction. And then the Delta portion, as you can see, and these are all 100% funded through Delta, was really structured to provide day shift, A and B, night shift, A and B, and then a relief shift. Plus, they still have their waymaster, traffic officer, secondary road patrol, and a violent crimes initiative deputy, as well as 2 admin staff.
Commissioner Barber.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You said that the transportation, you guys did the analysis on the transport officers to validate what your statement that you said, that it's cheaper to have 2 people on the payroll than to pay overtime?
No, no. This was what was adopted as the budget. So at the time, we had people in these seats, and the question was, were you going to lay people off or restructure? And the sheriff brought forward a structure that was adopted, and people reside in those positions. I don't have the analysis about whether or not it's a break even, if that's what you're asking. I could just tell you that previously those services had to be done on overtime. Analyzing the savings on that and then comparing it to the FTE, I don't know if it's a perfect break even, but
Yeah, but I mean, we actually have bodies in those positions currently.
we do, yeah. Even with the resignations we've had recently, because we just had 3 retirements that are all upcoming. I'd have to take a look at the last position allocation list, but we have people in the academy, so we're actually well suited. There are very few vacancies that don't have somebody in process to fill for our MCOL certified spots.
Commissioner Hart.
How far along are they in the academy?
I want to say 6 to 7 months. I'm looking for eye contact with Chris Coleman. 17 weeks, and then six to some months. Sometimes FTO can get extended, but typically it's about 6 months.
So they're nearly ready to go, and
Yeah, and that's what we've worked on in the past, and honestly has been difficult for the sheriff's department. This last year, when we did the budget cuts, we used to have a cadet academy program that was a separate line item, so even if they were fully staffed and they knew they had a retirement coming 9 months from then, they would use cadets as a way to start that 6-month process. They don't have that anymore, and so when they're sending people to the academy, it's with a FTE open spot, if that makes sense. So they've been a little constrained in that, but they've worked really well around it. So while they're in the academy, we seek grants to offset the expense that the state has available. The state reduced those amounts this last year, and it's a first-come, first-served basis. But anyway, we try to mitigate those costs as much as possible, but they do now bill into the budget at the full-time spot. Yeah.
Okay, Commissioner Shaver.
Go ahead.
Well, I was gonna ask Sheriff Reich if he doesn't mind. We still utilize a waymaster in the county? No. We do not? We do not. Okay. No, township has one. They pay for it. All right, okay, thank you. All right, Commissioner Shaver.
Okay. I guess I'll start my question this way. Ben, you've got an extra deputy built in here, which I think I understood previously was for contracts that we were hoping to engage in, which I'm hopeful with everybody else. If we don't have a contract yet, is that, and maybe you can't answer this question, but I'm going to ask you the question. You can get me the answer. Yeah. If that deputy, if that position's filled, which it doesn't matter if it is right now or not, because it could be next month, right? Is that deputy going to be out on patrol in the county until there's a contract?
No, it's a great question. That FTE has actually been unfilled all year.
Yeah.
Because if we were to use it to recruit, and similar to what you're saying, we fill it, while it's a budgeted FTE, it doesn't have a long-term home in order to build to. We just recently, because we were waiting, we knew the retirements were coming. We authorized them to move forward with recruiting somebody. And so now that we've gotten the retirement letters, it's balanced back out. But we did use it for like a month, just so that they could engage a candidate for the academy. But that role has remained
So I'm giving you a hypothetical. When it's filled, because I'm hopeful,
Well, I mean, they would not recruit to fill it if they didn't have a viable plan. When we initially put it in, we still had the overtime contract with Oneida. We had overtime contracts with some of the schools, and we were hopeful that either maybe Windsor and Oneida would be able to team up. The price point at that time just wasn't doable. Then we looked at the District 1 model plus Calamo and Oneida, which was a little closer, but still it wasn't enough to fully generate interest. So, yeah. That will not be filled if we don't have a full-time placement for it.
you got a question?
Commissioner Art.
Less a question and more just to emphasize that, Oneida Charter Township's budget for this thing is very tight and very narrow, so it is what it is.
I've got more. I was just letting him,
Okay, Commissioner.
I was just letting him jump in. So I understand that the change in the title of this, are any of these in the command structure able to go back out to the road during the day? How are we able to address, I understand we don't have 24-hour coverage. I get the obstacles we're against. I also understand that we don't decide in this body how those things happen. I'm just a little bit uncomfortable, I guess, with the total amount that the administration's costing, and looking for ways that we could get positive impacts out to the public on that.
Well, I could appreciate, and it's up, if you wanted to invite the sheriff up, I will say, thinking in terms of that, the one thing to keep in mind is we do have a police services contract with both Windsor and with Delta Township that says that we can't give a better deal to any community. Otherwise, those agreements open back up, and those are 10-year term contracts. I'm hopeful that over a period of time, we may get to a place where you all can start exploring bringing back services, but that would mean renegotiating those contracts at the time. So hypothetically, if the sheriff was able to just, and I don't know, come up with a soft patrol model where he had guys, and this is an MSP discussion too, because they have taken over as primary service for the county. So the idea of the county half providing, half not, I think would be a complexity that they'd have to work out with the state police. But any movement there would generate, I believe, grounds for those other contracts to come and open up. So we would, at a time that we actually explored that in earnest, I think it's part of a larger transition plan of bringing back a shift. And that's, I think, how you would have to bring back road patrol one shift at a time, starting with daytime, which is the most expensive because you need most bodies because that's when activity happens. And then you build up from there. The last piece I'd say is if there's an emergency, we have mutual aid in place. And so if say the lieutenant that's in charge of SRT, they will call to action to address needs as they come up if they're available. I'm looking, and that's covered in both of those contracts. What it wouldn't be would be it's not road coverage, but it would be for emergency situations that it's there.
So I wasn't on the board when that contract was written, so I'm not completely ignorant to it. So that prohibits the sheriff and the deputies from fulfilling whatever of their constitutional capacity for law enforcement to the county. And like, I understand offering a service, so if they like went to Hamlin Township and said, you know, we're gonna give you a really sweet deal on coverage, that's going to affect the other contracts, but this wouldn't be a contract, right? So is that defined as a contractual? I'm not looking for a
No, you're
loophole, I'm just
fine.
looking to understand it.
I, as administration, would tell you, I would counsel the sheriff and this board that even if it was on a passive basis, that would be grounds for communities to sue us under their contractual agreements, which would put about 8 million. Windsor's about 200,000, so yeah, 8.2 million into play. So the direction that the sheriff's department operates under right now is how do we maintain an infrastructure for training and command purposes that we can continue to replenish our ranks, because they have a number of retirements that are gonna come up over the next 3 to 4 years. This was the structure they brought forward, was evaluated. The unfortunate reality is that the state doesn't give a mandate for the sheriff to maintain road patrol coverage, because if it did, the state would have to pony up money to help pay for it. So it's not a coincidence that that doesn't exist. He has to maintain a jail. Technically, the road patrol, there are limited basis, which we went through in the prior budget, like large animal ag, different things like that. But for the road patrol, so he really is in a mutual aid basis for those communities. And it's the best we can do right now with the long-term outlook about how do we get back to a place where we can expand that in a way that relieves the cost for the communities that have contracted with us and restore services for those that currently have not.
Is
Sheriff,
the secondary
would you like
road
to comment?
patrol?
Would you like to comment on anything that's been said so far?
I think the biggest thing we have to understand is the people very clear on the millage, no, for road patrol. What I have currently is a skeleton crew, as far as I'm concerned, of what we can maintain at the sheriff's office, and also offer mutual aid to other jurisdictions here in the county for law enforcement. So I don't want to mess anything up with the current contracts we have, and I think we just need to work forward to try to get these other contracts with other townships to reestablish a road patrol. So it's going to take time. I get it. And I'm hopefully, and I'm not overconfident, but I'm hoping we can get those contracts. Time will tell.
And I haven't been able to do a lot for it just because of things that have consumed time this month. But if we can approach all communities, especially now that locals have gotten small dollar amounts from the public safety trust funds, and some of the locals are like, I don't know how to spend this, thanks, state of Michigan. Was a time to say, if you all banded together, you might be able to afford a shift. If the sheriff operationally is game to provide those contracts, and we can find a model that works, maybe everybody pooling their resources would be a model that we could do. But we'd have to cost it out and evaluate it. And once we know our next years of MERS rates, like in the same way with the contracts we have, we can communicate how their costs have come down in the retirement section of the personnel expenses, right? And it's kind of the thing we've talked about, make it easier to do business with Eaton County by making decisions that reduce our expenses.
Any other comments or questions, Mr. Shaver?
Not at this time.
Commissioner Barber?
I had one question, in regards to the sheriff. The secondary road patrol, I mean, does that, I'm not directing it towards you, I'm just throwing it out there. Is that, because they're not listed under Delta, right? So where's that? Because we got FTEs in those positions, right? So my question is like, they're not in Delta, so where's that funding come from? Or are they, because we throw in a lot of terms here, right? The accounting software doesn't say Command Central. Most of our documents say Command Central. I get this title from the budgetary documents. So, I mean, is there two people in the secondary road patrol, or is those two people, I'm just throwing a term, are they the transportation deputies? You know, like, I'm just trying to figure out here. Because to go back to that point, and the other points is, we can't put, you know, like, we don't have road patrol because then it'll screw with the contracts, and we don't want, that whole, I'm not going to beat that out. I'm just sort of curious, where's that funding coming from?
So those are actually grant funded through the state, and they're specifically for secondary roadways, and I'm looking to Chief Seidel and the sheriff because, and so when we were able to retain any semblance of road patrol through the Delta contract, because prior to that agreement, plans was to close the doors on all of road patrol. We were able to retain those grants because we didn't eliminate the service through Delta. Now, they're not exclusive just to Delta. They have to do roads not just in Delta, but primarily they do the intersections and the secondary roads around Delta Township. So occasionally they may pull somebody over outside because they have to provide coverage on secondary roads.
Okay, I mean, I'm not trying to pick a fight here, but we just got done saying Delta Patrol, and now you're telling me secondary road is somewhat Delta, but on the periphery.
So Delta also, they supplement whatever the grant does not fund.
Yeah.
So Delta, they are actually in the org set for Delta Township. They're in that special revenue fund.
Okay.
Delta Township is funding the remainder of those funds. So that is through the Delta Township Fund. That's why they're not included in the general.
Yeah, I'm just trying to make sure, you know, like, because when people look, right? You know, when you talk to people, I know we have a hard time communicating, but when you talk to people, they say secondary road patrol. And you know, like, well, I don't got none out here, and I got a you know, so I'm glad Delta's got them.
Yeah, I mean, if we get to a place where we can start restoring shifts, that's one of the first things when we negotiate a new agreement and we're in the financial position to do it, is that secondary road patrol would have to come out, but Delta would want to make sure that they still have coverage available in
Most
lieu
definitely,
of.
most
Yeah.
definitely. I can say one thing, though, is most good organizations don't have administration almost the same size as their operational force, you know what I'm saying? Like, our Delta personnel, the number of Delta people that do that, and then our admin is, you know, quickly, well, I won't say approaching, but, I mean, it's a good number, right? You know, like, some could say that the percentages to bosses to workers is not very good.
They're different, yeah, the sheriff's got his hand up to the chair, but
Step forward, Mr. Sheriff.
I understand. I would just say, this looked different when we had a full road patrol as well, but administrative functionality is always going to be command heavy because you have to have people that can enforce rules and procedures. In addition to all the statutory stuff, the sheriff's department has a massive handbook of rules that their people have to abide by. And if they need to discipline folks, investigate folks, and have those internals and all the vetting that goes with that, that has to be done. So when we look at this, you know, functionally, there's very few positions. We trimmed everything out that we could. So I understand your.
The comment wasn't an attack on the command administration. I'm just saying is when you look at it, right, we just got to be cognizant of other people not in this room, right? When they look at the numbers, and I'm not bashing the sheriff and I'm not bashing you. I'm just saying is when you look at the total numbers, when Delta looks, we got 39 people on in our contract, and then we got X amount over here. You know, like, it could look a little skewed. That was just my comment, so.
The grant is very specific. It's just for traffic. It's not to take criminal complaints or anything else. It's specifically for traffic. Traffic stops, crashes, stuff like that. So, and there's a misconception of road patrol, and it's called secondary, and that's just strictly traffic. So if that helps understand a little bit.
Commissioner Shaver.
I appreciate that designation. I'm just trying to understand, is that grant for the whole county, Sheriff? Or does the state understand now that we just are in those limited areas? Because Delta and Windsor need secondary road patrol too. This isn't like one part of the county against the other.
Right, since Delta is paying that other supplement to that, it's strictly Delta.
Okay. And the state's aware of that?
Yes.
Okay.
We have to report to the state. I think it's quarterly, isn't it, Chief? Yes, it's quarterly.
I just didn't want to get in a spot, right?
Not a problem.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments? All right, moving forward.
Well, while we're on this portion, before we jump back to regularly scheduled programming, we were asked to put together a millage transition planning document, just kind of showing, since the board's moved forward with doing tax cuts for residents through not seeking a millage renewal on the jail or the medical care, the jail was partially used to fund FTEs in the Sheriff's Department Corrections Division. This just shows revenues, ins and out, expenses, the last year of levy on the debt service, and then how we've built into the multi-year projection, those positions rolling back to the general fund. So that's what this sheet was. I wanted to give an opportunity if anybody had any questions on this.
All right, now, back to Melissa.
Give her the mouse.
All right, yeah, go ahead, Commissioner Shaver.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just think, according to some of the discussion, and Controller Dawson, you were talking about like what it might look like eventually to get one shift back in, in the county. Do we know what the costs would be associated with that? Is there already enough command structure in place for a day shift? Do you have any knowledge or estimates concerning that?
I'm not prepared for today.
I'm not trying to put you on the spot. I
can
just
take
think
the
it's a question
time.
we should answer.
I would safely just say, for some reason, the number around 4 million comes to mind, and I don't even know if that's enough to support a full shift. So a lot of that would take sit-downs with the Sheriff's Department. How many FTEs do you need as a base? And then if we are peeling back and taking that shift over, what's the redundancy you need for sickness and people out on medical leave? And then from there, we could evaluate the actual costs. I'd say, and this is something I can work towards in the long run, is what are benchmarks of financial health that we should look for? When do we know to start setting aside money to add services back? Part of it, I'm going to say, would be the funded ratio for MERS, would be my recommendation as administration. And then similar to how we're doing this wage study, if we have an unassigned fund balance going into it, you start setting aside money specific to that purpose so that you roll into it already prepared for the growth of the expenses.
So does our command structure right now, that you got the administration portion that you're always gonna, I mean, you have to have administration. But there is like a command structure under the administration. Is that able to support an out-county road patrol during the day?
I'll defer to the sheriff if you want to come up and share. If you were to add 4 deputies,
My question is,
5 deputies.
what foundation are we building from? I'm trying to assess where we're at.
Honestly, I think the command that we have now could sustain a day shift, 4 deputies, in the command that we currently have. Just that, got to have the money to do it.
I totally
I
understand
know you
that.
understand, I get
Yeah,
that.
I totally understand.
But yeah, I mean, years ago, the lieutenant had other duties besides the road patrol too, and so did the sergeant. But sergeant's main concern was to supervise the 2 deputies that we had on the road. I remember the days when Art Kelsey was sheriff. He put 6 people out a shift, 6 deputies. That's a lot. I mean, before we had this big crunch, I had 2 deputies and a sergeant. And they were running from north to south to east to west to take calls. Didn't have time to go through communities and show a presence there. It's kind of sad, but that's the way that happens. We had to work with what you had.
You got the best guys working for you. I just want to figure out how, you know, we've had meetings. I want to get people back out in the places where people need them in the whole county. And so that's why I'm asking these questions. Thank you.
Any other questions for Sheriff while he's at the podium?
No, not for the sheriff, it's for
You have a comment, Commissioner Art?
not a comment, this time an actual question. So you said we haven't quite begun figuring out when we'll have enough money set aside to be able to afford. About how far off could we guess, or when will we start to speculate on when we'll be far enough out from the point?
Yeah,
You understand my question.
Understand, and I'd be lying if I said I hadn't been thinking about it, but this is our first budget after the $8 million cut. And
Right.
So I think I've said previously, for where we are at, if you go back to the kind of the multi-year outlook, we're doing a tax cut for residents, which was priority one, provide relief. So you want to take a couple years to evaluate what impact that has, how well you're able to stabilize your ongoing expenses and revenues. And then from there, we'll have a much better idea as well, the effect MERS will have on the multiple years of adding additional funds above the required. So really, for me, I'm hoping around year 3, we can have those serious discussions. And then how does that look like engaging with Delta and Windsor to renegotiate those agreements if that's the direction we go to?
So it won't be responsible to begin guessing until, say, 2028 then, right?
No, but I can do some high-level reviews, but I would say 2028 or more. Just depends on how well our unfunded liability goes. Once I have the report next week, that'll tell us what 1 year's work of just additional contributions had on that.
Excellent.
Any other questions, comments? All righty. Now back to Melissa.
All right. So I think we've pretty thoroughly covered Sheriff's Department. They do have several other sections of their budget, which include animal control and corrections. I would say he is the best person equipped to answer those questions, much better than I am. But we do also have, you'll see here, after the Sheriff's Department, emergency services. This was adjusted this last couple of months to move this position into the central dispatch millage, so that's why that is zeroed out. And then we have community development and economic development. Both of those sections end up consolidated within the public safety section of our budget for functionality. Community development funds one individual. So if there are any questions regarding that. Okay. Last but not least is other. So that is our substance abuse, our medical examiner, CMH, Tri-County Office on Aging, as well as Veteran Services. Veteran Services does have a half FTE that is funded through a grant, and then we fund the other position through the general fund. So are there any questions on other? All right. If there are no other questions, then I guess I will turn this back over to Controller Dawson to address item B under our budget.
I'll just take the mouse.
Get somebody from IT up here with an extra mouse.
I don't know if they have bridged mice. It could just,
You can fight over who has control.
that would be really bad. I feel like that would create an opportunity for bullying.
You think?
Yep. So we have before your request, consultation with the chair. He requested not doing a presentation just because we sent out notice letting departments and outside agencies know that we wouldn't be doing, soliciting requests for increases in funding, but they could still provide presentation materials. So Community Mental Health has done that. They provided a letter. There are 3 pieces which I will be recommending be integrated into the budget. So starting with, we have contractual services through the jail and through the youth facility. We've just renewed 2 of those agreements. They have reasonable expenses changed on them. So those would be ones administration would be integrating into the next budget projection. So for the jail contract, that'd be $10,497 over. For the youth facility mental health therapist, that would be a $7,127 increase, split 50-50. So a net effect to the county of $3,564 after, I think, a reimbursement. Melissa can.
Yes, and that is also funded through the Child Care Fund.
It is, it is. So you'll see that as part of the special budget presentation as well. And then the other one is the Truancy Intervention Program, TIP, and that was a $3,692. So those 2 would be part of the Child Care Fund. So it's not an action, it's an informational, and they are here to answer questions if any commissioners have it about their total request. We went down to the minimum level allowed, which was $330,000 last year, which was a reduction. So if we were to just jump back into where we were at, which is how they presented it, that number would be $582,151. That'd be picking back up as if we didn't have the 1 year where we dropped down to the $330,000. Administratively, that would not be my recommendation. However, there is the 5% contingency basis that you all commissioners have options to have discussions on. So you can still have those discussions, but for the unassigned fund balance portion, I'm going to recommend that more to MERS and our unfunded liabilities in the long term.
To ask here, though, on the truancy intervention program, that portion that we have to pay, our 50% should be coming out of the Juvenile Justice Fund. Okay.
Sarah Laurie was not able to make it today, but she did send Shayna Badgley, who is the Director of Adult Mental Health Services. So if anybody has any questions, Shayna is here.
Mr. Haskell.
Ben, at that rate, that 582,151, that you are not recommending, would that include like the restoration of outpatient services, and community youth outreach, where we have zeroed on the lines below? I'm trying to figure out what are the services we're not getting by if we do not?
That's a great question, and honestly, I would encourage the chair, the health department,
That's fine, yeah.
So you were asking what services wouldn't be included?
So the recommendation is to, not increase the 18.72% to 582,151. But my question is at 582,000, what services would Eaton County restore if we were to fund that level?
I think we have opened the doors with the funding. I think what happens is the gap isn't covered. And so when people don't have Medicaid, it ends up being our general fund. And so I think the continued expansion would have to decrease to non-Medicaid people. So I think that the doors have been open, but what we provide would have to be more risk management, crisis related.
But I think that's what we're doing now currently,
Yeah.
right? Like, So my question is, if we were to increase the funding
If
to,
fully funded, then we can serve those people
okay,
with more than just the risk management, the crisis, the most severe, then you can serve more of the non-Medicaid.
okay. So I don't know if you can see the screen or if you've got one down there, but under restoration of outpatient services, our line is, marked a dash. So I'm assuming we do not have outpatient services through CMH right now. Is that how I would understand that?
I think you do not have counseling only, like for the mild to moderate.
Okay.
I think we are not serving.
At the top of the page there, Ben, restoration of outpatient services. And then where the center columns where there's no, I know that means that there's no request, but I'm assuming there's no request because we haven't funded it, right?
Is that the case, so we don't have outpatient services currently?
So I think what we have is something that's very, we're managing if people are high risk or severe. So we're doing kind of an assessment of that. But yes, we're not providing mild to moderate services.
So not to minimize at all, the service still being provided because it is necessary and probably life-changing for people, but it would probably be categorized as minimum level servicing or only minimal level servicing only for individuals that broach a certain threshold, is what you're saying.
Yeah, I'm curious if there's, this kind of seems like a black or white issue right now. It's like either we go based off of the recommendation or we do 582,000, right? Is there anything in the middle ground where we can increase services, but, do it a little bit more to our budget? This is something that has, kept me up at night since our last budget, with knowing that our suicide rates in Eaton County are 70% higher than the average everywhere else in Michigan. We had to look, veterans with PTSD in the face and say like, no, we have to cut this. This is something that I think myself and other commissioners on the board have some concerns about and would like a little bit more information on if there's something that we can do with CMH, but also, to administration's point, be fiscally responsible too.
I think it's a good question. I would imagine, and I can't speak for the health department, but hypothetically, if you were like, what can we do with 80,000 if this was the priority, and they could let you know if, yeah, with that footprint, we could do X, Y, and Z, but that'd be up to you all to request that. Or administration can request it and include it in a future packet for your evaluation, if that's what you're looking for more information about what a staggered.
I certainly would like to see a staggered. I think too often we put ourselves in these buckets where it's like it's either this or this, and we don't entertain any sort of gray area between. And that's personally where what I would like to see.
Okay. Well, we could talk offline and Sarah and have a discussion and maybe present a couple phased in discuss, and then have that as a topic for you guys to review at a future meeting.
I will say this is just CMH for community mental health. The section at the very top is the required contributions. Everything below that is in addition to the services that are required to be funded, which is why there's sections that do not have Eaton County. There's some sections that do. These are ancillary services over what's required. The top portion is only that. That's why there's the 580.
So the 582,000 is required.
No, 582,000 is the percentage of the percentage of their total funds that they are requesting. Our required contribution is the $330,000.
Okay.
They are hoping to restore back up to the 580, where it puts us back in line with the formula for the other communities. So that's why it's the request that they have. I would believe they would have a hard time, the community mental health would have a hard time doing anything outside of that 18% of the formula, which is the 580,000. They will likely not be able to offer any additional services for the county because we are not meeting their allocation percentage. So that is very likely what will come back, but I don't know for sure, which is why Controller Dawson would discuss.
And see if we can bring back more information on that.
I'd appreciate it, thank you.
Commissioner Wright.
Yeah, that is exactly what is going through my mind. What can we do that would help us serve the moderate type that we're not going to be able to serve? My biggest concern is when they don't get it early as a prevention type situation, then they escalate to the other more severe and those suicide rates and things like that. And with all the Medicaid funding changes that are coming down even from the federal level for qualifications, you are going to, in a struggling economy for certain people, end up in a worse mental health situation, which every time you turn the news on ends up with getting reports that we don't want to see, even in our area or nationally. And mental health has to be addressed like your physical health. So somehow, even a little, if we can come up with something to move us forward, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. Commissioner Barber, do you have your hand raised?
It was Commissioner Haskell's point. Two things can be true at the same time. One is be a veteran and the other is have PTSD that's not related. So as a veteran and having PTSD classified, the VA takes care of that. So when people come in here, I know because I am. So you can go in here and you can say, that's a veteran and they have PTSD. Doesn't mean they got it from their service. So those are the people that you were suggesting that we pay for.
Commissioner Haskell.
Sure, yeah, honestly, thank you for that point, Commissioner Barber. The one person I was keeping in mind was the mother that wasn't just for her, but for her children as well, that happened to be a veteran. So related or unrelated to service, I never got into it with her. But the other question I had was, I seem to remember there was some sort of discussion last time around for every dollar that we put in, there was a state match, I believe, as well. Did they change the funding source to that, or?
I believe after those meetings took place, CMH was able to explore the use of general fund to secure that they wouldn't lose those dollars. But if you can speak more to that, I think that'd be good context for the commissioners.
Yeah, I think that we do get a match, but I think it was, Sarah explained it in the beginning of her letter. It did not jeopardize the funds, but it still draws down our general fund.
Sure.
And so there's less and less of that these days, as you guys all know. But I think Commissioner Pearl-Wright made a really good point that I think highlights that, is that changes to Medicaid are coming in early 27, and less people are going to be on, which is going to increase the people of non-Medicaid needing services, and so then that general fund is going to drain.
Sure.
So our ability, I think, to do what we're doing is going to change.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? All right, thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much for coming in. So those will be, those three items will be something that will integrate into the forecast in future years. I believe the last thing is a fund balance update. So This is not an action item, this is just a FYI. The last time we had
Before we go into
this.
that, Mr. Controller, why don't we take a break? It's now 11 a.m. and I see people jumping around in their chairs. So let's take
do
a
it.
15-minute recess. All right, welcome back, everyone. We will resume this meeting with item 7,
Right,
Mr.
so.
Controller.
This is just a fund balance policy update. This is not an action item. I just wanted to show you where we're at. So on April 15th, Board adopted the resolution mentioned establishing the minimum fund balance policy, so the target of 10% of prior year expenses, and then 5% of budgetary consideration for commissioners to use or not use as part of the budget process, leaving an unassigned fund balance over. I wanted to share where my administrative recommendation on this allocation is at. So I eliminated the missing middle housing discussion. I think we'll approach that from a policy standpoint. And so a year from now, if we're in a position after going through Public Works and Human Services, making recommendation to Ways to the board, if we have a policy framework in place, oh, I have it. Thank you. Then that might be something in the future, but for this year, we're putting the bulk into MERS, 300,000 to retirees' health. Those two payments are in addition to those listed in the budget forecast. So we would be talking, if we adopted the budget, $1 million through the budget to MERS and then 1.7 through the unassigned fund balance. So that'd be a $2.7 million payment, or 2.8 really if you round up to MERS that we were talking about. And then for the salary study, the implementation, that'd be for implementing and paying for the study itself. If we're able to do it and we don't tap all that money, that would just be more fund balance for consideration in the future. But likely that's to put us in a position to be more likely to implement whatever comes out of the salary study plus bargaining outcomes in the next year with our union groups. So that is the current allocation. Welcome questions and feedback if you've got them. Otherwise, you'll see this again on July 10th at 9 a.m. at the next regular scheduled Ways and Means meeting.
Commissioner Haskell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The salary study, happy to see it. For the 1.5 million, is that going to cover everything?
That is my hope. We do have 7 bargaining groups. If I get authorization on this, first step is you do letters of engagement, because typically wages are tied up in bargaining and it looks a little bit different for everyone. So I'd like to solicit to the unions that we engage under the understanding that for wages, it would be tied to the salary survey. In which case, then we would have discussions about what are comps that are applicable for each bargaining group. I'd like to standardize the comparable communities as much as is possible, so that way we don't have, 7 different ones for every union group. So we've got 49 comps worth of data, kind of grounded in what we talked about, SEV, population, and proximity for regional, and then come up with a weighted average so that you're not over compensating because you happen to live next to Ingham County, which has a much more significant tax base, but you can't ignore the fact we do compete with Ingham County, right? So you've got to balance it, yeah.
So my follow-up question to that, you mentioned earlier that with whatever the findings are of that, we might not be able to implement all the salary adjustments immediately, right? So are there concerns that by doing a salary study for the entire campus or county here, that if we don't implement those changes right away, that when we go to implement what changes are left, we're utilizing stale data?
No, I think that's a great question. And in fact, the last time we did a salary study in 2014, we did not fully implement.
Yeah.
At the time, what it looked like was if you were topped out in your scale before and the new scale was unveiled, you didn't go to the top of the scale. For the new scale, you went to step 5, and it took you 2 years of progressive step increases to then top out on the new scale. And then at the same time, there were years that the cost of living adjustments were 0. It's not that inflation was 0 for those years, it was just the county didn't have the money. So to your point, if it takes you 3 years to implement and essentially your COLAs, are you getting to that figure from 3 years ago, you've already kind of missed the snapshot. So the 1.5 would help to develop where we have a baseline. This is our cost of living adjustments that we're budgeting for. If we have additional to do catch-ups we will do that, but it would be subject to the county's finances.
Sure.
If you have a year where you can't fund above that, you can't fund above it. And so that'd be part of what the negotiations with the groups and how we would look at it for the non-union. The goal being when you finally get to that implementation date, even if it takes you 2 or 3 years, you get there at the value of what that study said it was 3 years ago.
All right, that makes me feel better, because the one thing I really want to avoid is saying like, okay, we spent 1.5 million on a study this time. Oof, we're in a worse shape than we thought. And then 4 years later, hey, can we have another 1.5 million for a salary study? That'd be I think a hard pill to swallow.
I agree. And I think as an organization, every 10 years should be the snapshot that you seek to do that. Like that to me, in my experience with HR and with different things, is a 10-year period. That being said, it's been a while. It's 14 years that we're coming up on. Did you want to say something? Yeah.
Sorry. I will say that the last time we did the salary study, which was in 2014, we did not implement fully like we've talked about before, and the cost of that full implementation was $4 million.
Yeah.
So 1.5 million today is what we're setting aside. The hope is that that does actually alleviate what we've needed, because we have made major inroads into the portions of our budget that have been hard to fill. So sheriff's department has had a hard time filling certain positions. Our youth facility has a hard time filling certain positions. Tech services has a hard time filling positions. Some departments will grow differently than we have currently budgeted. The hope is the 1.5 sets aside and puts us in a better position. But we don't know the true cost of what that will be until the salary study comes back. So that's the hardest
There are
part.
2 pieces to that. There's cost to do the study, which is, I'm estimating between 225 to 250,000, because it's per job, right? So we've got to pull all of our jobs together, job descriptions that we want part of the analysis. And then the rest is literally to help fund the actual salary increases, if that makes sense. So we're setting aside the remainder to buoy our ability to implement it.
Yeah, and one thing that we've just got done doing a salary study at my work, and the last time we had done one, I think, was only 4 years ago. And just with what inflation has been over the last few years, we found out that we're already quite out of sync. So don't be surprised.
So just to clarify, we're going to undergo the study regardless of the 1.5 million? Or what's the timeline for all this, do you think?
Yeah, if there's no commitment of funding to it, I think we do have to do the study, but it will just give us that much less of a leg up in implementing. And I don't think you can implement a salary study over like a 10-year period or 5-year period. I will say that this is a massive lift for administration to carry out. Even with having a dedicated HR personnel, it doesn't matter. You contract out, but you still have to coordinate and gather all of those descriptions. And then the longer it takes you to implement, you then, for financing purposes, have to categorize every individual where they're at, where they should be at, and then build. Anyway, so we would have to build a redundant structure to track cost of living versus catch-up provisions. The sooner we take that off our plate, because we can get to the implementation, the better. Not having the 1.5, that's tough to even consider how long it would take. But
Commissioner Barber.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just think I don't know if you just labeled it this way or what, but I think it's a little too narrow focused. If we were gonna do this, position allocation and descriptions, salary study, revenue recovery, right? And then efficiency improvements across the county. If you're gonna spend that kind of money, just because that's the way we've done it isn't the right answer. So that's just my opinion.
Commissioner Wright.
One time, I was assigned to go someplace else, and I said to Connie, I go, blah, 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 and it was about wages, okay? She said, be real careful if you dive into that, because if you find out you can't cover the bill, you've got to report. So if we do the whole county versus just the departments that are having the biggest issues, are we creating another issue?
Yeah, and we would have to bargain in a way to where it's clear that that provision above the cost of living is subject to the county's ability to pay, which is why it would be the subject of negotiations with the union groups. I think, to your point, if you had a 3-year implementation schedule, year 2, we had a really bad financial crisis, like say a 08 level event that critically just dropped property values. Anyway, in that type of doomsday scenario, if you were still obligated to do the cost of living and the catch up for that year, it could put the county in a compromising financial position, right? That's kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, or the morale of the people, I think she had an idea on, she was trying to convey to me. So
I agree. The thing is, morale for the folks that know they're underpaid is already pretty significant.
pretty significant, yeah.
Yeah. This would put pen to paper of what the reality is. And there may be coming through that process that we say we just can't pay that position at that level, but at least you're being candid and honest with people about it. We're limping along, and when we do cost of living adjustments, it's one amount for everybody. You have certain positions like IT and attorneys are good examples where technology integration, right? Body cameras at the sheriff's department. You have groups whose job scopes have like fundamentally shifted in the last 12 years. And in those roles, they will likely get more than some other groups, right? I think I've said this previously. Someone might get a $5,000 raise, and somebody doing a job that has had less change and less dramatic, right, may only get $500. That's why you do these studies, so that you're putting the resources where they're most needed, as opposed to just doing the blanket cost of livings on a scale that's outdated. So I'm hopeful, but I'd say we take it one step at a time. If we need to implement over multiple years, we do. But we've got to start somewhere.
Any other questions? All right, on to number 8.
Yep, 8 was just a FYI for members of the public. We are historically, like the last 2 budget years, we had these departmental presentations where everybody would come in and talk about their department, their statutory, constitutional, and other functions they performed. Very informative and very helpful. We will get to a cycle where we'll do that probably once every 4 years when there's turnover for a new board. The first year we would have those sessions. I believe they're about 6 to 7 hours each. We linked them for the prior year. So if you do want to sit back and kind of get an unfiltered look at everything these departments do, it's there for your viewing pleasure. But we just, for time's sakes, have focused on moving through the budget review as we did this time. So those are the links. Those are live. If people want to go watch those videos, that's what they're there for.
Okay. Any questions for Ben? So you got some late night viewing ahead of you. All righty. Any other questions concerning item 8? Moving forward, we are now at limited public comment. Anybody in the, would like to speak to the commission? I see our treasurer stepping forward.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Darius Raynette, Eaton County Treasurer. Last month, I believe I reported the first and second quarter results of our investments, and also mentioned a U.S. Supreme Court case that all the Michigan counties were following very closely. It's Pung versus Isabella County, and that essentially was using the fair market value of a property rather than the price determined at the auction sale for basing the proceeds on that. And I have some good news, mostly. The Supreme Court ruled in favor of Isabella County, ruling that, quote, "We conclude the proper baseline under the takings clause is price obtained in a tax sale rather than using fair market value." This means that the way we've done it in the past, where the claimant claims the proceeds are based on sale price less back taxes, fees, expenses, and then anything remaining is what they get. There's a process where they can file forms for that. The one wrinkle, though, is the Supreme Court remanded the case back to the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals to address certain claims that Pung raised during the Supreme Court hearing regarding whether or not the sale was properly conducted. And in the Supreme Court's decision, they said that the price determined at auction is fair as long as the sale was conducted as it's traditionally been and historically. So there could be future lawsuits and auctions going forward saying, you know, we didn't do things properly. Me and all the other counties, we run everything properly. It's possible that there could be some baseless lawsuits or things like that, or maybe some legitimates. But overall, it's good news. Our legal counsel is looking into that, and the MACT is preparing a press release to be published early next week with all the details. So, any questions? Great, thank you very much.
Under public comment, I would add it was a 9-0 decision from the Supreme Court. So it's pretty rare that you see that kind of uniformity coming out of the Supreme Court. So it was.
Any other public comment? All righty, before we adjourn, does everyone have a copy of our 26-27 budget meeting schedule? If you do not, see Ben or Logan after the meeting. Or I guess Ben's going to address it right now. Try to make yourselves available for these meetings if you can. Anything else we need to cover, Mr. Controller?
Yeah, so I would just say in closing, I appreciate everybody's time and feedback that we were able to get for departments. You know, this is not the adoption date of the budget. We've got 3 more Ways and Means hearings. Then we have a truth in budgeting hearing with another ways before a full board, right? So we'll continue to have discussions, refine our projections as we get additional info. But with where we're at today, you have a budget that's adoptable, it's a conservative, and it's a responsible budget. So I think moving forward with our discussions, we're really discussing how do we build back. And thank you for all the work that you put in the prior year. It was the toughest budget I think hopefully we should ever have. And I thank you for your time today.
All right, thank you. And with that, we are adjourned.
Thank you.